And man, if this thing really gets rolling, the Colts really have offense production that can possibly turn out to be top 5 or top 10 in the NFL. What's up, Draft Network fans? This is Keith Sanchez here to talk to you about the 2022 draft class for the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts had a fairly interesting offseason, right? They traded away quarterback Carson Wentz and just kind of cut their losses and said, you know what, that this was a failed project. But then they turned around and went after the veteran quarterback, Matt Ryan. The Indianapolis Colts front office, head coach team, they feel as though they have the team that can win a Super Bowl now and win now mode. So that's why we've seen them consistently go after these veteran quarterbacks. But now it's just time to see if the Matt Ryan project works. So entering the draft, it wasn't so much about finding those, I guess, guys that can be potential superstars. It was more about finding those guys that can fill the right roles. And looking at the draft class, I think the Indianapolis Colts, they did exactly that. The Indianapolis Colts didn't have a first round pick. So their first pick came in the second round, and they went after dynamic playmaker Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce had one of the best off seasons leading up into the draft that I can think of any wide receiver. He ran a sub 4.40, he jumped over 40 inches, and he did all of this at 200 plus pounds. At Cincinnati, Alec Pierce showed that he can be a true ex number one wide receiver, and that's the role that I fully expect him to try to fill with the Indianapolis Colts. So you pair him with wide receiver Michael Pittman, another big body wide receiver that showed that he can be a high caliber football player. I think the Colts have a dynamic 1-2 punch for quarterback Matt Ryan, and they may finally have that wide receiver core that they need to really make a deep playoff run. In the third round, the Colts went with another offensive dynamic playmaker and tight end from Virginia, Jalani Woods. Jalani Woods is 6'7", and he ran a sub 4.640. So that just shows you how athletic this guy can be. So when you talk about having a tight end that's 6'7", able to run those vertical seam routes across the middle of the field, I think that this turns to be a really high ceiling type football player. And for quarterback Matt Ryan, he needs those type of players. And we've shown that in the past when Matt Ryan is surrounded with those high caliber weapons, Matt Ryan can be a high caliber football player. So I think tight end Jalani Woods, this is a guy that has a very high ceiling, and I'm expecting him to be immediately inserted as a starter in this offense. And man, if this thing really gets rolling, the Colts really have offense production that can possibly turn out to be top 5 or top 10 in the NFL. With their second pick in the third round, the Colts went after Central Michigan offensive lineman Bernard Raymond. This offensive tackle position is a position that the Colts have been trying to address for many years now, and this past offseason, they didn't re-sign offensive tackle Eric Fisher. So Bernard Raymond, I'm believing, is penciled in as a starter right now, but I have to say I have some concerns about Raymond as a football player. This is a guy that played lower level football, and when he had his time to showcase himself at the Senior Bowl, he didn't do it very well. But like they always say, man, he has high traits. So this is a guy I'm expecting to come into training camp. He will probably take his lumps that first year, so hopefully he's not the starter and the Colts can find another, I guess you can say, upgrade or somebody to fill that role. But by year 2, I expect Raymond to put everything together, and then the Colts can finally have a bookend starting tackle for the next 10 years in Bernard Raymond. But the third pick in the third round, the Indianapolis Colts stuck true to their draft philosophy, and that's just drafting high caliber athletes. So with this pick, they drafted safety from Maryland, Nick Cross. Nick Cross is a guy that is an explosive straight line athlete. So when he can align the ball carrier upright, this is a guy that is explosive to ball carriers and creates real violent tackles. So we all know that the Indianapolis Colts, they had a fairly eventful offseason when it comes to addressing the defensive back position and in the safety position specifically. And I don't think that Nick Cross will be an immediate starter, but this is a guy that I do think when the Indianapolis Colts decide to bring on that third safety, he will be that third safety. So this is a rotational depth guy, but I think he is a high caliber football player, and who knows, 2-3 years down the line, Nick Cross may become the starter if they decide that they don't want to pay one of those veteran guys top-notch dollars at the safety position. In the fifth round, the Indianapolis Colts drafted interior defensive lineman from Missouri State, Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson has shown to be a high level athlete at the interior defensive line position. And we all know that the Indianapolis Colts, one, they pride the defensive line, and two, they have a really good defensive line. So I think this pick was more about having a deep rotation because we all know that, especially in the AFC, you're going to have to get after the quarterback. So adding a guy like Eric Johnson, it will prove well when it comes to those playoff games and also the back end of the season when the Colts really need to get pressure on the quarterback. And with their first pick in the sixth round, the Indianapolis Colts went after tight end from Youngstown State, Andrew Ogletree. Now, this pick, I have to be honest, this was kind of perplexing to me because they drafted Jalani Woods in the third round, and then they also still have Mo Alley Cox on their football team. So they're fairly set at the tight end position. But knowing Andrew Ogletree and his background that he used to play wide receiver, I think that this is a guy that they brought in because they wanted to see if some of those traits would translate to the NFL. So this is a guy that I think that has to come into training camp and really prove that he can kind of be that flex wide position and be a good receiving tight end, so that way he can match up with the rest of that room when you talk about Mo Alley Cox and then tight end Jelani Woods. So I'm expecting this guy to come in, be more of a depth football player, and probably come in on certain packages, and then maybe by year 2 or year 3 he may see more significant playing time on the football field. And with their second pick in the sixth round, the Indianapolis Colts drafted Cincinnati defensive lineman Curtis Brooks. Curtis Brooks had his best season this past year where he was able to get over 7 sacks, which is a testament to his athleticism and just his overall ability to get after the quarterback. And I think if it's one thing that the Colts have showed us in this draft, is that they want guys that can get after the quarterback. So Curtis Brooks is another guy I think will be brought along in this defensive line room, and to be quite frankly, he's going to have to scrap it out to make this team. And that's just a testament to how deep the Indianapolis Colts are along the defensive front. So if Curtis Brooks doesn't necessarily work out on the Indianapolis Colts, it may not be because of his talent. And this is a guy that I can very well see being picked up by another team and ultimately making a roster, because I do feel as though Curtis Brooks is a productive football player in the NFL. With their last pick in the draft, the Indianapolis Colts decided to draft cornerback from Yale, Rodney Thomas. And I have to simply put it like this. I think that this was just a depth pick, right? I think that they were going after a player at a position that they've been trying to fill needs. We know that they traded Rock Usin and they didn't re-sign Xavier Rhodes. So this was all about addressing a positional need. And I think that this is a football player that he will have a tough time trying to make this team, but he may find his way if he can prove to be a very good special teams football player. And then maybe by year 2 or year 3, he's a guy that can eventually stay on the roster and find a starting position. So, Colts fans, that's my recap of the 2022 draft for the Indianapolis Colts. Make sure to comment and let me know how you guys felt about the 2022 draft for the Indianapolis Colts.